Welcome to Around the Corner, a podcast about leadership and organizational performance. I'm Ayanna James.
And I'm Megan Liu. Welcome to Season 1, where we talk with 9 future-focused leaders and dig into their stories and perspective, as well as wisdom about driving change and leading into the future. At Strad, we believe that leadership is the engine of performance, and our work creates the pathways to make that possible.
Conversations like this podcast help shape our own work with leaders, and we are excited to share with you. Perhaps you'll be challenged or take away an insight that enriches your own leadership journey. Welcome to Around the Corner.
In this episode, we sit down with Karen Greve Young, CEO of Futurpreneur Canada, who reminds us that performance is about more than outcomes. It's about impact. Impact that is inclusive, trust-based, and lasting. Karen's journey has taken her from high-achieving roles in the private sector to purpose-driven leadership in the nonprofit world. Along the way, she leaned into her values and reframed success around sustained impact, transparency, and accountability. Today, she leads a national organization supporting young entrepreneurs in shaping Canada's economic and social future.
This conversation offers a window into what it means to lead with clarity of values, to cultivate trust as a foundation for performance, and to insist that belonging and unlocking talent are not just side priorities, but central drivers for impact. Let's step into the conversation. Before we dive into the story of your leadership journey, it might be nice just to warm the room with a bit of your perspective on a few key concepts that we love to talk about on this podcast, Around the Corner. So wondering if you could give your elevator on what is leadership, what is performance, and if you're able to also share a little bit of perspective on what is potential.
Good questions. I like the direction we're starting.
Okay.
So for me, I think when I think about leadership, what leadership isn't is a title. Often leaders have a title that establishes the realm in which they lead. But I often think of lowercase l leadership and capital L leadership. Capital L leadership is formalized by a title. Lowercase l leadership is leading. It's doing. It's basically setting a path for people to follow. And I think that happens informally in our lives, in our organizations all the time. And those leaders, those people who lead without necessarily having formal authority, are people who can really make important things happen. When I think about performance, I think often people think performance deliver results. And I think that is true. I think performance it's going beyond activity to action and impact. And I really think when you're thinking about high performance, it's not just what you're doing, it's how you're doing it. And we all know these people in our organizations who they're doing the work well, and it goes beyond the metrics. It goes beyond the results they're achieving. It's people want to work with them. People feel better and more successful and more impactful when they are on that person's team, whatever role that person has on the team. And then when I think of potential is all about the art of the possible, whether it's for an individual or an organization. Potential is, wow, what could happen? What could be achieved? So when you look at a team member, an employee, you have what they do today. With the right skill building, development opportunities, what could their future hold? The same is true of organizations. So I think I love that you started with those 3 themes, because I think those 3 themes really just say a lot about what organizations can achieve and how they can achieve it.
Yeah, and Karen, thank you. That's really beautiful. And I've already noted your insight on performance beyond activity to action and impact. So can I throw you one just off the cuff?
Of course.
What about impact? How would you frame what that is? It's beyond metrics. You've given us a hint to that. Yeah, as you think about that, what is impact?
It's the outcomes that are achieved by doing the work. So the impact, as an example, if there's a workshop that's hosted for the young entrepreneurs, Futurepreneur supports, right? We'll look at we host the workshop. That's an activity. We have people come. Those are some kind of outputs in a way of holding the workshop. We have people who attend the workshop, and then we have people who weren't sure about starting a business but decide to start a business on the basis of that workshop and get insights from that workshop that help them not only start a business, but have that business succeed. Well, that's impact. And impact can happen in lots of different ways. And impact is sometimes impact's driven by relationships. It's not a one and done. It's that repeated pattern. I think also, and I think this is probably a theme we'll get into, trust can drive impact. You're much more likely to follow a path that's laid before you if you trust the person setting it out or the organization setting it out. So I just think impact is where you're really getting to those lasting results.
Yeah, that's lovely. That's lovely. Seen and what I hear in that too is like the seen and unseen impacts,
Yes.
right? Those that are
Yes.
above the surface and those that actually can change someone from the inside out.
Absolutely. I mean, there are unintended consequences that happen, and they can be positive and negative.
Yeah, fair. Okay, lovely. What a great beginning. So why don't we slow things down, take it back a little bit, talk about your leadership journey. We can all read your accolades, your accolades, the places that you've worked, the countries that you've lived in, but from your own voice, how do you tell your leadership story? What is that leadership journey for you?
It's an interesting question. It's not short, this leadership journey. I just had my 30th university reunion, so 3 decades of my career. And I often think of it. There are two different ways to think about the thread of the arc of my career. One is geographic, really three different big regional chapters. And then one is type of organization, type of activity, and they somewhat align. And so I think, my first chapter, you know, graduated, went to San Francisco, and I was just in a rush to achieve. I didn't actually know where I was going. I just knew I wanted to get there really quickly. And so, which is a really interesting place to be. So I had been very high achieving, wanted to continue to be high achieving, but didn't really know why or what for. And I would say that kind of defined the first chapter of my career. And I was lucky because I worked with some really great mentors in San Francisco who challenged me to do better, to, not just show up, but do well, ask hard questions, think beyond the output and the numbers. And so that San Francisco chapter was very much working for profit companies, and honing my business toolkit, as it were, but not really knowing why. And then my second chapter, following a very brief stint in New York that was cut short by September 11th and opportunity, I went to London, England, which is where I started the next chapter of my career and also of my family. And that chapter was really a kind of a chapter of curveballs and realizing that you have to go with the flow of what happens. And in particular, when I was in the UK, my mother had already been diagnosed with ovarian cancer. So my mother was diagnosed with cancer when I was at business school, and I just started to really change what mattered to me. I was working for a company at the time that had the tagline, "We make companies more valuable." I thought that's not really that compelling to me. What is compelling to me is being there for my family in a meaningful way and thinking about how to support people who most need support or would benefit from support. And so that really started the nonprofit chapter of my career. And I was fortunate to have some really interesting roles that were volunteer, which worked well with having a mother who was far away with terminal cancer and being able to be there with her, and also going through infertility myself. And so I kind of had this crazy calendar of where I needed to be when for these two different generations of priorities in my life. And out of that, I did lose my mother, but she knew that my son was coming, and I had my kids. And so my London chapter was sort of one of a reset and a reset of my values, reset of what was important to me, and a realization that I could get off that fast track that I had, that fast track to nowhere that I had been on. And so I had that chapter, and then my partner and I kind of stepped back and said, okay, where are we going to raise this family of ours? He was from Canada, I'm from the United States. We had our kids in the UK, and we chose Toronto. And that was just the most serendipitous decision we possibly could have made. And so my longest and current chapter is this chapter in Toronto, in Canada, my adopted home that I love, working in the nonprofit sector and really trying to make this country that I love better. Trying really thinking about not only impact but inclusive impact. How do we make impact accessible and inclusive, and how do we foster a prosperity that everyone can participate in, and that makes the country, makes all of the rich, unique communities in our country better. And so that's been this third chapter, and it's been a chapter of working for high impact nonprofit organizations. I think sometimes there's this misnomer that nonprofit means not impact, or not profit means non-performance, and I would be happy to chat with anyone about how untrue I found that to be. I think we should have high expectations and high hopes and high aspirations for every organization that we're part of. And I certainly have that, and I've had this incredible chapter in Toronto, and now leading an organization that works across Canada.
I love that. There's so many beautiful turns of phrase there, Karen, that you just gave. You are evidently lending your leadership to something that reflects your values.
Yes.
Um, I do want to talk about the meaningful work that Futurepreneur is doing, but just before that, in a few words, like what are, when you said of resetting your values, what are the core values that are grounding you right now? What is it that you're standing on as you lend your leadership to this impact making work?
It's interesting. So Futurepreneur went through a values exercise a few years ago. And we, I've been CEO for 7 years. We did this after I'd been there about a year. And it really mattered that the values that we developed were authentic to who the organization was. And they are also very much my values. And I think the two go hand in glove. And that's really why I
Mhm.
think what drew me to Futurepreneur. And to some extent, some of the values when we started off were aspirational. So our core values, which are really my core values, are being mission driven or purpose driven, right? Working for something that is bigger than ourselves, and trying to achieve meaningful, inclusive impact. The second would be diverse and inclusive. So really valuing and respecting diverse voices and perspectives,
Mhm.
and achieving inclusive impact, knowing that we actually genuinely can achieve more better by having representative voices at the table making decisions, and that we want to create opportunity that everyone can benefit from. So, diversity and inclusion are core values of mine and of our organization. Being accountable and transparent. So I think that there is a lot of, you know, it, an organization is not a democracy. And so you're making decisions constantly as leaders that not everyone got to vote on, but if everyone participates by providing input, providing their perspective, and then you are accountable to the decisions that are made, and you're transparent and sharing how you got there, I think a lot can be achieved. And it really is important for building trust. And then people want to work in a place where they're respected and valued. And I think thinking about working in a collegial collaborative environment. So collegiality and collaboration, are other values that are also mine. And just that, work can be fun. And I've gone through chapters of my career where I was working from home in more independent jobs. And I found that I could be very efficient, but not as effective as working as part of a team, right? There's just something with collaborating, with having a mind beyond your own doing work. And so when I think about my values, I think that the most important that keep coming to the top are that purpose driven, so intentionally purpose driven, intentionally diverse and inclusive. And that I think as a guiding force has helped me feel really positive about this chapter that I'm in, and really excited about what we can achieve, and really excited about what happens when you have that alignment.
Yeah. Yeah. Great insights. That
Mhm.
line that you just used when you said that organizations are not democracies, right? Leaders have got to make decisions. Megan, there is a book or a phrase that you use often about the distinction between voice rights and decision rights. Bring that into the conversation because I think that's interesting here, where we need both.
Yeah, years ago, Karen, a great author out of MIT, I was searching for, how do you establish a culture that allows for great participation, allows for great input, and yet at the end of the day, the leader or the leadership team still need to make decisions, to your point on not a democracy. And so this
Mm.
frame offered ensuring great voice rights in the
Right.
organization, ensuring great ability to participate, ability to give feedback, and yet clarity on decision rights.
Right. I
And
love
how,
that.
right?
I
And
love
how,
that. Who's
like,
the author?
I would have to get back to you on
All
that.
right, please come back to me. Because I think we think about that all the time, right? We
Yeah,
talk about how feedback is a gift and we really mean it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that our
yeah.
our opportunity and our job is to then respond to that feedback and and action it. But actioning it doesn't mean taking all of it, because the reality is that each person in an organization has their lens, and sometimes there are other lenses or priorities that don't make it possible to action everything that everyone wants. That would be more chaos than effectiveness. However, figuring out how to get that feedback, get those voices heard,
Yep.
and then be able to respond meaningfully. I love that.
Voice rights and
Yeah,
decisions rights. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
I love
Karen,
that.
what have you learned about being able to collect voice rights, collect input, and yet guide and make the decisions? What practices are you finding? How have you found the balance with allowing for great participation in voice rights and yet, at the end of the day, still driving decisions and performance? What have you noticed? What are you practicing?
We're practicing a lot. How long is this podcast?
Yeah.
We do a lot
Hours,
of things. And
days.
I think so we do a lot. I think part of it
Yeah.
is people are different and respond in different ways. And so it's really important that you provide multifaceted ways of giving input and feedback. So in terms of feedback mechanisms, we have anonymous, regular engagement surveys, which are very broad, where we are asking a lot of questions from our team twice a year, and we're able to look at what trends we're hearing, and then action some of the recommendations that come out of it, like more transparency on salaries, thinking differently about learning and development opportunities. So that's a way in which we get feedback. We have monthly, what we call same team meetings. So we refer to our team as hashtag same team. No matter which department you're in, we're all on the same team trying to drive
Hmm.
impact together. And our
Hmm.
monthly same team meetings, we'll have a discussion session at the end, where people can ask any question, and myself, and our senior leadership will do our best to respond and answer. We also have an anonymous way that people can ask questions in between meetings, and then we'll post on our employee SharePoint drive answers to those. We meet regularly as a leadership, so I believe in really representative, large leadership. I think it's important that every employee feels represented. So I have an executive team and a senior leadership team, which really oversees, and represents every function. But then we're a national organization with 140 employees, and we're in all but one province. And that these different regions and these different teams are they're different, and so it matters that those perspectives are represented. So we have what we call our Futurpreneur operations and alignment meeting of every leader and people manager across the organization. So that's about 35 people, but it means that every person is represented monthly at that meeting, and those leaders and people managers are able to come together and have conversation, represent their teams, and then the important part is then feeding back to their teams. And I'd say this is where the hard parts happen is that and the foam group, like those, our foam team are not, they're decision makers for some things that are within their control, but then there are other things that are decided at the senior levels and informed by the foam group. What matters though is that then things are communicated, and I think that that's where, to be honest, I'm going to be honing this for the rest of my career. And it's really hard to get right because I think sometimes people can feel like, oh my gosh, they're talking about that same thing again. Will leadership just be quiet about this? And that's not great. We want to have be providing, fresh perspectives. At the same time, what I think happens more often is I didn't know about that when something's been communicated a couple of times, but clearly not in a way that it landed. And so I think that it's really important to ask for feedback, ask for perspectives, ask for, these different voices, and then hear them, but then play back. Even if you don't decide to go in a direction, responding and letting the team know why. So I think that that transparency in responding, and that, you know, if you decide, if leadership decides not to take an action, that's okay. It's just important to communicate why we didn't take the action. We, yeah. So I think those are, real things to think about and reflect upon. Yeah.
Yeah, Karen, so much in that was your beautiful storytelling of perhaps my language around your rhythm of business, your way of guiding teams, your values are playing out in how, you're capturing voice rights, feedback, inclusivity. And yet you also know, those are the hard decisions around leadership in terms of,
Right.
you need to converge, you need to make decisions, you need to move forward, and, you know, the ability to ensure it lands well from a feedback standpoint. So pulling out and celebrating, your wonderful skill set showing up and all of that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Karen, the other thing I hear in that is your a perspective on the architecture of trust, right? Like those pieces around transparency, around playing back, the fundamentals on what it takes to be heard and listened
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really
What?
hard. I mean, I'll,
Mhm.
sorry, go ahead, Ayana.
No, no, no. Keep going. I was going to probe just like, and what else makes for trust? Because that feels like the currency that you are developing and stewarding.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, the challenging thing is that one of the things that builds trust is time and relationship. And, trust takes a long time to build and a nanosecond to break. I mean, it's funny, I recently added to my wall behind me a picture of the Weld Boathouse, which is where I rode at university. And, often a picture of people rowing on a beautiful river or lake in the morning with the steam rising, or in the mist rising from the water is that image of teamwork. And I think that most people think about that and think that the reason why it's teamwork is because the oars are all entering the water at the same exact moment, and then the rowers are pulling through together. That is actually not why rowing is the perfect sport when it comes to teamwork. It's because it's trust. I mean, rowing at its core is a sport where it's not, my kids who are more skilled athletes than I am would tell you that it is not a sport that is driven by a real skill or talent. It certainly isn't a hand-eye coordination sport. It's really a sport of people who are able to work really, really hard and put everything on the line and take themselves as far through that pain, to the outer limit of their pain threshold as they possibly can. And that's what wins races. And you have to trust that everyone else in the boat is doing it. You are facing backwards in a crewed boat with a coxswain. The coxswain is guiding you, and at some point in the race you're almost unconscious, just rowing as hard as you can, and your coxswain's reminding you to slam your legs down as hard as you can to get every bit out of the water. And again, you're trusting that your teammates are doing the same, and you see the results in terms of whether you're winning or losing based upon the strength of the crew and how you think you will do. But again, you have to trust that everyone else wants it as badly as you do and is putting it all in. And I think that lends itself to organizations. You can't see everything that everyone is doing, and in fact, every now and then it feels like people want radical transparency to the point where everyone knows everything that everyone's doing, and you can't actually be productive that way because it means everyone's spending all their time getting informed and not actually doing their own work. So you actually just have to trust that the team member you're working with is also doing their job. And there's a bit of trust with but verify, but in organizations that are working well, there is that trust. And I think, when I think about our senior leadership team, we all have different functions at Futurepreneur, and it works because we're all trusting each other to both lead our functions, but also then come back together and collaborate where needed to make things happen, staying accountable to each other, being transparent about what's working well and what isn't, and then fixing the things that need to be improved. And that trust is really important in organizations. And I think, again, it's hard to build and easy to break.
Yeah. And I've been learning too, Karen, that it is a spectrum because the building and breaking may be seen as two polarities, but there are moments of bruising that
Yeah.
can happen along the way. So this is just a fascinating conversation. What are you practicing or what have you learned about mending the bruising that can happen before the break
Yeah.
along the ways? Have you already said it? Are those the practices of coming back and talking, the transparency, talking about what we didn't do well, the continuous improvement? Is that how you heal or continue to finesse trust along the way?
Yes. And it's also acknowledging that you don't know everything. So we will often do these like pulse check sessions where it's like, how is everyone feeling? How are your teams feeling? What are we seeing? And that's where sometimes we'll hear about potential breaches in trust. I think often that bruising comes from a
Mhm.
misunderstanding. It comes from not knowing something explicitly, so making the wrong assumption. I think it's fair to say that right now there's a lot of rethinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those concepts are being really challenged. And when I look at Futurepreneur, we adopted diversity and inclusion as core values, that we are diverse and inclusive in 2019, which was
Mhm.
before the pendulum swung very far in a pro DEI direction and well before the current reversal of that. And it just is who we are at Futurepreneur. We couldn't actually do our work supporting diverse entrepreneurs across Canada if we didn't hold those values. We wouldn't do it well. It matters that we work in a diverse and inclusive way. As we did the work over the last year or so to really reflect on what that means for us, and to, every few years, it's important that you look back at your core principles and you reflect again and refresh and make sure that they are not only still resonant, but that you're communicating and articulating them in a way that still works for the organization. And so as we were doing that, I became aware that a couple of our team thought that looking at that meant that we were retrenching and that we were actually going to step away. And it was this interesting moment where I think that those members felt a lack of trust because they thought that we were all about being a diverse and inclusive organization, and they feared that that was not true. I felt a lack of trust because I thought, how can you know me and know the journey we've been on and the way I've always spoken about this and feel that looking at it and reflecting on it, and it was partly driven by having a new leader in that role. We have a head of inclusive impact at Futurpreneur, and in fact, that's a new title that she has. We changed her title to really reflect what her role actually is. She's a Korean Soto woman out of Calgary, where you are, Ayana, who leads that work for us. And so we were just doing this refresh, and it was interesting that even during the refresh caused this two-sided questioning. And so the end of the story is that we just had a couple of really important, rich, hard conversations to each assure the other side that yes, this is still really important. Yes, we still value this, and it's okay that we're now looking at reaffirming what that means for Futurepreneur, reaffirming that this is a priority for us. And also that the state of the world affects people's lenses. And I think that as an organization, there's what you control within the organization, and then there's everything happening outside, right? Like, I'm an American. It's really painful to be an American right now, given some of what's happening. We have team members who are from Palestine, Israel, Ukraine, team members who are in areas of the world that are really hurting, and people have things going on in their family. And the reality is everything that we bring to an organization is what's happening within the organization and everything impacting us outside. And I just think it's important as leaders that we keep that in mind. And so when something happens like this moment of on both sides, how can you not trust me on this? Having the making the space to take a deep breath and come back together and have those hard conversations and come up with the understanding that sometimes it's because it's so important that it's so loaded, and it is the things that are the most important and the most loaded can also be the things where we bring the most emotion.
Mhm.
So it matters that you have that conversation um, to reset.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going back to your first definition on leadership. This is human-centered work
It is. It all is.
and
We're,
deeply
we're people are
integrative.
messy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
People are
Yes.
messy and human, and that's the beauty of it because as an organization, there's your team and there's the messiness and humanness of your team. There also are our customers and our clients, right? Everyone we're serving, they're also people. Even if you're in a B2B business, that business you're serving is run by people. They're often people making the purchasing decisions. Even if it's an AI making the purchasing decision, there's a human somewhere in there evaluating the way that they're doing their work. And so I think it just matters that we're people focused on people. And that's where that representative leadership comes in, because the people we're serving are society. And in a country like Canada, we are a really rich,
Really
diverse
diverse.
society. We have people whose families have been in Canada for millennia. We have people whose families arrived within the last couple of years. We have, people with all different faiths and perspectives and lived experience. And it feels really important that as you're thinking about how do you have leadership that can serve these
Hmm.
communities, you're not only looking at the professional experience, marketing, communications, HR, finance, you're also looking at the lived experience of actually understanding what it's like to be of and from these communities.
Yeah, Karen, you're talking our love language. Megan and I, as co-founders of Strat, because we know that performance is inextricably tied to context. We know it's inextricably tied to the character of the humans that you have and the fullness and complexity and beauty of their stories, as well as their technical, right, competency, capability pieces. And all of that works together with leadership at the heart of it, trying to steward the diversity of all of that
Right.
toward performance. Okay, so let's go there for a second, because in the midst of all of that humanity, leading humans, which is a lot of variability and complexity and beauty to it, you also are running a high impact, high performance organization. I think of your own scaling over the tenure of the 7 years that you've been there. Numbers matter, right? Numbers matter. The number of lives, number of businesses that you've helped start with amazing young entrepreneurs. What are you learning about stewarding a performance and a growth mindset in your organization? In the midst of all of that complexity, right? Everyone comes together with that growth mindset. What is that for you? What does it look like at Futurepreneur? What are you learning about it?
It's a great question. I think it's first of all, it's just acknowledging and helping our teams acknowledge that change is just a reality, right? Like change, we are in a changing landscape. Like we'll sometimes say that if we keep doing what we do today and we do it perfectly, we do the best job we possibly can at doing our work the way we do it today, in just a few years, we're going to be irrelevant because the needs of entrepreneurs will change. The kinds of careers and businesses that are starting will change. The landscape will change. And yet there are things that you can provide as givens. So I think the givens of employees will be treated with respect. You will have great benefits so that you don't have to worry about, your health. We'll take care of your mental health. We'll have mental health benefits as well. Simple things like in our offices where we have an actual office with multiple people, you'll have a dedicated desk so that you'll know where you're coming in the morning. So setting certain things to be kind of understood standards allows for that growth mindset, that nimbleness that people need. So when I think about a growth mindset, it's the opposite of a fixed mindset. It's not looking at taking everything at face value and thinking that someone can or can't do something based upon what is today. It's thinking about what is possible, right? So as an example, we for the way that we do our work, we had a way that we approached our fee structure, and it was just the way that it had always been. And we realized that we didn't love it. It felt a bit regressive because it was more of a fixed fee per month as opposed to being driven by the loan amount, but it was just the way that things had been. And then we just reflected on it. We thought, well, we don't actually have to do it that way. Just because that's the way it's always been doesn't mean that's the way it has to be. We can do an upfront fee and scale it by loan amount, and that way it just feels more fair, frankly. And so we changed it. I mean, and that sounds really obvious, but it wasn't obvious at the time. We're constantly looking at how do we make things fairer, how do we make things better for our entrepreneurs and for our teams, and that takes sort of a growth mindset at the organizational level. And sometimes we do things differently. I mean, I'll give an example. When COVID hit, and the federal government did the SEBA loans, the emergency business, what was it, emergency business account loans. A lot of our entrepreneurs who were sole proprietors or had only been in business for less than 2 years didn't qualify. And so we said, well, they also need some sort of cushion to get through this. And so we really quickly rallied, created a product which is different than anything we'd done before. And because of the speed and the type of adjudication that we did. And we pushed out in about 6 weeks a volume of loans that we would normally take 6+ months to do, because the moment demanded it. Now, if we had not had, a growth mindset and this idea of a team coming together and thinking about how to better perform, how to better support, that wouldn't have happened. So
Yeah, that's
yes,
great.
it happens for individuals for sure, but it can also happen for organizations.
Yeah. And my
Hmm.
takeaway from what you just shared, Karen, is kind of like a refresh definition of growth mindset in that it is about looking ahead to the possible, maybe your early definition of potential, but you also need to have the ability to let go. It,
Yes.
it was the insight you said about, right? The willingness to change, the willingness to do things differently than we have in the past. And so back to complexity of being human, right? Looking forward and also letting go of what has been that may now be the stuck that you need
That's
to move
where the
through.
values matter, I think, right? If the values are your if the values are your North Star and the values are the things that have to be that you take as givens as opposed to
Mhm.
the activities or the way that you're implementing your program, then you have the ability
Agreed.
to
Agreed.
adapt and evolve your programs to better meet the needs of the communities that you're serving. And the
Excellent.
same thing
Yeah.
within the
Yeah.
organization, right? I mean, I'll give a really funny example. Like we are we're a national organization and we have offices like Toronto with 80 people. We have 25 people in Montreal. And we have one person in Moncton and one person in St. John's, Newfoundland, and one person in Fort St. John, BC, and
Mhm.
several one person or two person offices. Before the pandemic, I'd say the way that we worked was that people in offices with other people had this rich interaction. And we tried to include people who weren't in one of our larger offices, but we did not do a very good job. And we didn't really have an awareness that we were a hybrid organization before hybrid was cool, right? We had remote and we had in person. And the in
Right.
person was really inflexible. It was, thou shalt work Monday to Friday in these fixed hours.
Mhm.
And the remote was very remote. And so before the pandemic, we'd introduced Slack. We'd done a lot to try to improve the tech platform of these monthly same team meetings so that when the pandemic hit, we were readier to have, to use that virtual water cooler we had on Slack and really communicate effectively across the country, to do more things by Zoom, and then now we use Teams as our default as an organization. Because we thought about our core principles, which are that how do we collaborate? How do we communicate? How do we stay accountable and transparent to each other? How do we stay inclusive so that we have the diverse
Mhm.
mindsets coming in? And how do we work toward our mission? And I think things like that, where you are flexible on the tactics but inflexible on the values and the how you want to work will just help you achieve more better.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. That mantra, right? From like living value, moving from like values that are stayed on the wall to living values and really
Yes.
leveraging them to make better decisions.
It's also interesting when you think about that value of diversity in an organization. I think sometimes people have a really rigid perspective on what that means, and they think about it related to census categories. What we see as some of the richest areas and aspects of diversity are things like what size of community someone is from, right? How much access someone has had to, being in a rural or urban area. Canada's a country with very concentrated urban pockets and a lot of people also who live in between. As someone who's always lived in cities, I really can't adequately understand that. It matters that our team members who are serving rural, remote, northern communities have that perspective. And so we have to create a space for those voices to be heard,
Mhm.
right? And so I think that those are some of the more interesting conversations we have. I mean, we put a premium as a national organization in Canada on people being bilingual. And every now and then we have to just stop and remember that the vast majority of our organization, which is over half Canadian immigrants, so we're half newcomers, the vast majority are bilingual, trilingual, multilingual. They may not have French as their second, third, or fourth language. They may have four languages, and English is the fourth, and French isn't one of them. But they come with
Mhm.
all of these different languages, and even like how we communicate, it matters that we're taking that into account and acknowledging and embracing that.
Complexity.
Complexity.
But led by values, my takeaway, right? Like, yeah, we could engage in the complexity if we're clear on the things that matter most. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing in you, Karen. Um, Karen, we spent a little bit of time together in conversation, you and I, as friends, colleagues. And I've watched you also going to some personal practices, like watch you practice what it takes in order to lend your leadership to this kind of sophistication, right?
Yeah.
You're stewarding a home life, you're stewarding volunteer work, you're stewarding leadership outside the walls of Futurepreneur. And I know you to be a really resilient, creative, competent contributor. Tell us how that happens. For you to
How do
be
you do it?
grounded, wake up in the morning, put your feet on the ground. What are the one or two things that are those practices that help you stay connected, so that you can show up so beautifully?
I mean, there's no magic to it, and it's all trial and error and continuing to try. I
Yeah,
think
honest.
for a couple of things for me, my physical health and fitness is really important, and I clear my head outdoors. It used to be running, now it's walking more or paddleboarding in the summer. But having that time where I'm moving and not on a screen is really important to me. Having, some strength in my life, physical strength. Um, I'm really buoyed by people. I'm an extrovert. I'm charged. I'm an out loud thinker. And, full disclosure, we can decide whether to share this. But full disclosure, Ayana, you are also my executive coach, which has been very important to me. I think being a CEO is, it is different. You report to a board of directors who are not in the work every day as a nonprofit leader, and everyone else in the organization reports to you. You have no peers. And so having an executive coach as a sounding board and to help support you and help support me in making the right decisions and thinking about things that might not have come to me yet has been important. I'm part of two incredible networks of women leaders,
Mm.
Women Nonprofit CEO Network, and also my former Mars executive leaders. And those are just great communities where we learn from each other, we support each other. I've really benefited from them. And I think the final thing as a leader, and this was hard for me to grasp. I think I used to think about time when I was not actively working as time when I was sloughing off and, being lazy. And the reality is, I actually really need that space. And the more senior I get, the more important it is that I actually have, and that's where those walks come in, that I have that space because everyone else who's in leading an aspect of our work or doing an aspect of our work, they're right in it. And it's hard to have the clarity of judgment when you're in it. And so if I as CEO can be a little bit above it, which doesn't mean that I don't, roll my sleeves up and get in it for certain aspects, but if overall I'm able to be trusting my team and then I'm coming in, I can see things that they might not see because they're so close to it. And I think that that's been interesting that I think about work more than I ever have. I'm
Mhm.
actually working potentially less, except for the beginning of my career when I was in investment banking. I was thinking about and working all the time. But for the most part now, a lot less. And then I think the last thing, and it kind of goes to that one, is a leader. I mentioned the rowing metaphor before. In rowing, you finish the race and your cup is empty. You have no reserves. If you time it right, you get to the race and then you have nothing left. I've had the unfortunate experience of having nothing left before the end of the race and bonking, and that's a bad idea. But you ideally use all of your reserves when you get to the end. As a leader, you really can't. You have to still have something in your cup so that you always have something in your cup to give to others. It's that whole adage of put your own oxygen mask on first, leaders. I think that's important, and that's also hard because I think sometimes we do want to always give to others, and you do that and empty your reserves at a risk to the organization, and that's hard to get your head around, I think,
Yeah.
for me to get
Yeah.
around.
The last point you just made, like, it's so important. I know this summertime season, I'm thinking a lot about all the re's, right? Like recreation, recreation, replenish, renewal,
I love all the
recovery,
reads. Yeah,
all the re's,
yeah, love that.
right? How do we,
Yeah,
reconnect
yeah,
again? And that in itself requires so much attention, Karen. Like Megan and I talk about this as, as partners in business, friends in life. Just how do we encourage each other and observe each other's readiness and need for, pardon me, refilling that wellspring,
yeah.
reconnecting to family, etc. So I think that's really beautiful.
I was just saying, I think that it's helpful when people remind each other of that. Like we talk about all the time about, family first always. Um, and we mean it. And that works best if you model it. Like I'm an empty nester now, and my son goes back to the UK tonight. This is my only engagement today because I'm going to be available for him today, and I'm going to be doing my best to stay off my phone, off my devices, so that I can focus on him, right? And focus on family. And I think that, you know, it's almost compartmentalizing. Humans can't really multitask very well. When you're trying to connect with someone while you're on your phone, really you're on your phone,
You're not
right?
connecting.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you've got to know what actually recharges. There's another recharges you.
Yes.
Not what's the fad, right? How
Yeah.
many of us have been told you really should journal? But I've met people that's not their thing. They've got to do it another
Well, for me,
way.
I'll go in and out. I'll go through periods where actually journaling is really helpful to me every morning. And then I'll realize that it feels more like a burden than something that's giving me energy or helping me through my day. And so
There you
I'll
go.
stop for a while and then I'll go
There you
back.
go. Yeah, yeah. The other thing I wanted to come back to was your point on, taking your walk, creating space. Oh my goodness, the number of conversations only you and I have had, but several executives. Where's two things? Time to think, and let's have a conversation about like what are we thinking about? And that senior level work is really about often about perspective making. How do you get perspective? Create room for perspective making and the meaning making of like all the complexity we've talked about in this hour, all the complexity and putting the pieces together. I think about it as like an executive role often is thinking on behalf of those we care about.
Yes. Yes. And make,
They're pulling those oars, right? Was putting everything into the execution in many ways. And we get to, as executive leaders, right, do that thinking on behalf of them, ahead of them, as a gift to them.
yes. And I'd almost frame it a little bit differently. I don't know that I think of it as thinking on behalf of them. It's more setting the framework to help the group thinking be more effective and constructive, maybe. At least when I think about a leadership team, right? It's not, I mean, yes, sometimes I'm responding objectively and thinking, on behalf of the organization. Sometimes I'm just coming in with different questions so that a group conversation can happen differently. Like I've recently restructured the organization, as you know, to have a smaller executive and a larger senior leadership team, and to a large extent, the role of the executive, which is only four of us, is to set the stage for really effective, constructive, thoughtful senior leadership discussions on the things that matter. And so taking some of the more detailed work or the more tactical work that doesn't have to be done by the broader group off the plate so that that group can really focus. And so some of that is me for sure. And some of that is others. And here's a really important thing. I think one of the best things as a leader is you get to develop your fellow leaders, right? I have such an incredible senior leadership team at Futurpreneur, and I feel really grateful having seen the impact when we've brought in new amazing people, but also seeing the impact when we've elevated people from other parts of the organization into
Mhm.
these senior leadership roles and just seeing them
Mhm.
take their impact to the next level and take the organization to the next level. The best thing as a leader is developing leaders and getting to work with incredible groups of people. By far, it's my favorite part anyway. Maybe other people don't feel the same. It's my favorite part.
Mhm. Karen, I'm curious around how you're thinking about growth for Futurepreneur.
I think I think about growth in a very sort of organic, authentic way. And
Mhm.
so, as an example, organizations that support entrepreneurs, sometimes the way that they think about growth is changing completely where they play. So, a few years ago, there was a move toward
Mhm.
lots of companies started, but how do we help them scale? And a
Mhm.
lot of people went from earlier
Right.
stage to later stage. And we intentionally said, well, no, our whole raison d'etre is that early stage. It's helping entrepreneurs who wouldn't otherwise be able to start a business. And in
Mhm.
our case, so it's helping entrepreneurs age 18 to 39 access
Mhm.
the money, the inclusive, accessible loan and mentorship that they need to succeed. And so how do we help more people? So when we think about growth, it's serving more people more effectively. So how do
Mhm.
we things that we've done are increase the amount of lending that we have available to entrepreneurs,
Mhm.
really tailor our offerings for Black entrepreneurs and Indigenous entrepreneurs by we've built teams with lived experience. A team of Indigenous colleagues led by
Mhm.
our head of inclusive impact, Holly, to support Indigenous entrepreneurs, where those entrepreneurs feel seen, understood, and valued in a different way. And we've we've reframed some of our workshops to be more culturally
Mhm.
appropriate and help those entrepreneurs really better understand the fundamentals of business to succeed. With our what we call our Opiki Win series, I could not have come up with that series. So that's where having that representative leadership helped us go in that direction. Our Black Entrepreneur Startup Program has helped more than 500 new businesses with Black founders start over the last 4 years. It's incredible. It's really happening at scale. And again, it matters that it's led by an incredible Black woman based in Montreal who's bilingual, Tamara Chanuin. Our founding head of that program, Mona Lisa, now leads communities for Futurepreneur. So all that to say, we didn't abandon our core and say, well, now we're going to help at the scaling stage. We said, we know what our core is. How do we do it better? And so we have grown in terms of how inclusive we are. And we just supported our 20,000th young entrepreneur in our 30 years, almost 30 years. We'll turn 30 next year, but our 20,000th entrepreneur was just supported. And I think that the growth that we've achieved through our journey from the very first entrepreneur supported in London, Ontario, 29 years ago, has been possible because we keep trying to do what we do better. We're not pretending to be someone else, but we're trying to make our offering better, make our client experience better. And in doing that, what we found is that we found incredible partners,
Mhm.
federal government, six provincial governments, several companies, including our largest corporate partner and actually one of our founding partners, RBC, and another
Mhm.
significant corporate partner, TD Bank,
Mhm.
who want to invest in this model because they want to achieve more impact. They see
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
positives that come from helping young entrepreneurs succeed. So when I think about our
Mhm.
Black Entrepreneur Startup Program,
Mhm.
it is what it is because RBC made a bold $100 million commitment to Black-led businesses and already had a partnership with Futurepreneur and said, we want to achieve this. How do we do more better? And came to us. And we signed a $50 million partnership with them to really deliver on their behalf accessible loans to Black founders under 40. who are starting businesses. And it's been this huge success. And so that happened organically and authentically. We didn't set out to say we are going to do this. We took the opportunity when it came and knew that it built upon everything else that we were doing and then made it happen. So when I look at our next growth, what I can say is it will continue to be about inclusive prosperity. It will continue to be about helping young entrepreneurs not only start but succeed and really foster a really vibrant, inclusive economic future for Canada by helping entrepreneurs succeed. So that's what growth will look like, and we'll see how it all comes about.
Yeah, I applaud your strategic clarity, Karen. I can imagine the pressure to go upstream, solve for scaling issues, solve for exit issues, solve for what, to follow the entrepreneur's path. But your commitment to, your own problem space, your own raison d'etre, your own reason, it's incredible 30 years later. So yeah,
Well, and I've
well
only been
done.
in for 7, and I should clarify something actually in what you just said, because what we aren't doing is starting work with entrepreneurs who are at that scaling stage. To your point, though, of following the entrepreneur's path, we are doing more of that. So we're actually sort of double clicking on not only helping entrepreneurs start, but helping them succeed. So we are actually doing more to create programming and peer-to-peer support communities for the entrepreneurs who started with us to help them succeed. So
Nice.
what we're not doing is coming in at the side for
Yep.
growth stage founders and helping them. What we do realize that sometimes our entrepreneurs where we help them get started and then we'll hear from them. They're like, where did you go? Where are you, Futurepreneur? Like we could still use your help. And so we actually are now looking a lot more at achieving growth by helping those entrepreneurs grow. And we have some really exciting impact metrics that we've started collecting that show that the entrepreneurs who start with Futurepreneur are significantly likelier to succeed than the average business. And I think that's because of the support that we provide.
Yeah, hashtag futurepreneur in your pocket.
Oh, I love it. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, well done.
Mm. Karen, we call the podcast Seeing Around the Corner. So this is the moment when we live into our namesake about what you see around the corner. So first with you, like when you think about the next phase of your leadership in Futurepreneur, where are you focusing your energy from a leadership perspective? Maybe your stretch space, your focus space.
It, I really am focused on how do we keep making this organization better. I think there are a lot of business books out there, and everyone has their favorites. One of the ones that I often use in a way that I'm positive it was not originally intended is Jim Collins'
Uh,
Good to Great.
okay.
My observation is that most, if not all, of the companies in that original book are now not only not great, but are kind of irrelevant, right? Kodak. So it's hard. I think that we've created this great organization doing really important work. And so our opportunity is to keep doing that. And as I said before, we can't do that by continuing to do the same thing. So really being thoughtful about, okay, so where do we go now? Where are our opportunities? How do we preserve our essence? And we're at a tricky size of organization now, 140. When we were 80 people when I started, that's a pretty small organization. It's much easier to know everybody. 140, you still know everybody, and yet you're getting to size and scale. And so, how do we keep the essence of everything that we do really well while shifting? And then how do we support some emerging trends? So one of the trends in Canada that I think will get more and more important is entrepreneurship through acquisition, right? We have a huge cadre of business owners who are looking to age out of business ownership. They're looking to retire. And we would like to keep those companies Canadian. So we support entrepreneurs who are not only starting businesses, but also are buying businesses. We have our Owners Wanted workshop series to help people think about entrepreneurship through acquisition. So I think that that's an exciting space to look into. So there are more spaces like that. I think that we can look into to figure out what's next. I think, when you know, you asked about me and my leadership, and I'd say, while I'm at Futurepreneur, my leadership is as Futurepreneur CEO. So different people think differently about their leadership journey. I always feel like while I'm in an organization, I'm all in with that organization. Again, it's kind of like I'm in the middle of a race. I'm not thinking about the next race. I'm in this race. I'm getting to this, I'm working on this one. So, but yeah, that's really where I'm focused. And I think that there are so many exciting things. We're doing a lot in the next year to enhance the digital experience of our entrepreneurs and our staff to be more effective. So it's that continual improvement, continuing to do what we do better and supporting entrepreneurs in new ways.
Karen, if you were designing a leadership curriculum for the next generation of leaders, maybe some of them are your young entrepreneurs, or holistically looking across Canada as you do, what would you make sure was on that curriculum? What would you wish that every up and coming leader knew about?
I think I wish I had known more about the importance of representative leadership early in my career. I just didn't understand it. Like I didn't really, to be honest, I just didn't really think about it.
Yeah.
And I think that it's easy to think that if you just hire people with the most relevant professional experience,
Hmm.
you can build a great leadership team. And that is kind of a necessary but not sufficient thing. I think it really matters that you have perspectives. It matters, the worst thing that can happen is an organization where everyone just agrees on everything all the time, because then you're not necessarily having discussions. It matters that you have rich discussions, which sometimes mean that you're coming from different perspectives and disagreeing so that you can work through things. So I think I would probably focus on the importance of building broad representation into the leadership team, and then setting the space for those really constructive, effective conversations and discussions, and that help you address blind spots, help you think differently.
Hmm.
Again, it's certainly something that I underestimated. I mean, I'll share a quick anecdote. When I was at Mars, I was trying to hire for my team, and I'd realized that I had an all white, mostly Canadian team, and I had kept getting all white candidates applying for the roles on my team. I'm like, what is going on? And I asked my colleague Usha Srinivasan to post on her LinkedIn my role, and it changed my candidate pool because a leader who was not white was posting about this role on her LinkedIn. And I just think that, you know, the, things like that, those signals are really important. Like you have to, if you're going to set the table, invite people in, you have to actually show that you really want their perspectives. You really, you, you've created an organization that does value what they bring. So I think that that is it. And I'll often talk to friends who are startup founders, not necessarily Futurepreneur supported, but they are either founders or they're brought in as CEO when an organization has 10 people and they're all men and maybe two men of color. And then they're looking to hire and they keep lamenting that they don't have any women. I'm like, you've just got to hire the first one. You have to think, be thoughtful about this, right? And then they start to broaden the representation on their team in all different metrics, and realize that then you get the virtuous cycle where it keeps happening. So I think that that's a real one.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, it's necessary, and you just gave it's a call to action,
Yeah.
right?
And
It's
it's
a call
just,
to action.
it's, there really isn't the excuse of, well, there's no one who has this experience. So then change which roles are in your leadership team, right? If you think that the only role that you need to add to your senior leadership team is a chief technical officer and everyone who applies or is qualified has the same has the same background as everyone who's already in the company, add the chief talent officer to the executive team, or add a chief of staff, add a different role,
Right.
which will
Right.
bring that perspective and make the team better. Like there are lots of creative ways to think about it. I just think that, and what it isn't, what, and this is really important, what it absolutely is not is tokenism. You're not inviting someone because you just want to see them. You're actually acknowledging that you need different perspectives and voices at that leadership table. It will be better. You will make better decisions and you have richer discussions.
Yeah, beautiful. And I hear you saying apply a growth mindset. Think
Yes,
about what's
absolutely. Think
possible.
about it
Let
differently.
go of what has been.
Yes,
Absolutely. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, really important. And I think the other thing that's hard for leaders is you don't get to do everything you want to do right away. There are changes that we've made at Futurepreneur that I knew in my first month needed to happen. And 4 years later, we finally were in the position of doing them. That was brutally frustrating, but particularly as it relates to our digital transformation, we needed to be ready and have the resources, the people resources, the financial resources in place to do some of these things. It's hard. You have to have the culture that will adopt the change. It's hard.
Again, our love language. This is what we do, right, Megan? The system is in the room. Strategic clarity, execution, performance, great culture, learning culture, performance culture. Um, Karen, anything that you haven't said that you want to say?
I don't think so. I probably didn't speak as much about the cultural transformation that Futurepreneurs had, but it's hard because our starting point was so dark that it probably doesn't need to be in the podcast. Um,
No, I think we've done a beautiful, authentic conversation. Uh, as we end our coaching calls, right? Often I play back to you the insights that you said. I want to make sure that you heard yourself. So maybe that's a good question for you. As we close this time together, did you have any ahas in hearing your own storytelling? Any insights? New ways of looking at things based on the conversation?
it's interesting, as often happens when you and I are speaking. Um, the aha, I think, is that I don't know if we actually talked about authenticity in this conversation, and yet I think it is the thread that weaves it all together. I think that this is a really important thing for leadership is it's important to lean into the aspects of leadership that make you more effective. And also, it has to be authentically yours. Like, there is no script for, being the, perfect type of leader for organization X. The perfect script is having the elements that that organization needs and then delivering in a way that is authentically you. Like me, Karen Greve Young, I would not fit well, I'm sure, at a lot of organizations where what I authentically bring is not what that organization needs. And that really matters. And you can feel it when someone's off and when someone is not leading in a way which is true to who they are or true to what the organization needs.
Mhm. Yeah.
Authenticity
Yeah.
matters.
It
Yeah.
does. It does. And I also think it's why these conversations, executive coaching, uh, good friends and confidants, mentors, because sometimes we're also working out who we are and who we're becoming,
Yes.
right? That authenticity has itself, its own journey, its maturation, its own cycles. So to do that with others in community that is trustworthy, and has a skill in playing back all the things that we talked about, right?
Yeah, exactly.
To support our own leadership journeys is really critical. So thank you for that, because this conversation hopefully will support and accompany someone in their authentic leadership journey.
Hopefully,
Some
yeah.
insights and some
Great.
ahas as they have a listen. Karen Greve Young, what a delight. Canada is better because of you. Canada is better because of the teams that you have curated, stewarded, and unlocked. And we're all better because you are modeling for us the bravery of having the conversations that matter and living with integrity in our leadership and committing our lives to doing the work that stewards um, development and creativity and joy across what it is to be a Canadian. So thank you for that. You
Mm-hmm.
American on this side where you call it home.
And Canadian now
And
too. Yeah,
Canadian, okay,
yes.
and Canadian. I love it.
Feeling very
I love
Canadian
it.
these days. Yes.
Yes, very much
Gratefully so.
so.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Anna. I've
Yeah,
loved this conversation, and
Karen.
I'm really grateful that you are shining the spotlight on such important themes to help leaders keep honing and developing their leadership to make this great country better. Yeah. Thank you for all that
Yeah,
you're doing.
wonderful. It all matters. Okay, until next
Karen,
time.
thank
Thanks
you.
so much,
Until next
Karen.
time, Ala Proshan. Have a wonderful rest of the day and weekend.
Hey, Megan, it's time for that moment in the podcast where we get to share our own takeaways from the great conversation we just had. We just spoke with Karen Greve Young, CEO of Futurpreneur here in Canada. And so I'm wondering what stuck out for you. What was fabulous? Well, what was top of mind for you as we exited that conversation?
Yeah, I felt so fortunate just to have such a listening role and taking away so much for our own leadership practices. The first thing that really stuck out to me was the foundation of trust that she's building. You asked her several great questions around architecture of trust and how she, builds and develops her organization. And it just seems so clear to me that she has been thoughtful and intentional in the design necessary to get after trust. Clarity on values, clarity on communication practices, feedback practices,
Mm,
expectations of her folks. She herself seems to have such a mature architecture on what makes for trust. I thought that was beautiful and so many lessons learned for other leaders to take from. And I also thought your question on helping know that trust, she said it, trust takes a long time to build and a nanosecond, I think she said, to break.
yeah.
And in that, you can just see the spectrum. And,
Mm,
I loved how you took her into, yes, and there's moments of where trust can be bruised in a certain way. And so how do you mend it? And in that conversation, I think you could just see all of her experience and all of her exceptional leadership skills in knowing that and helping the organization return to consistency of remembering the core values, using
mm.
feedback, using communication practices, using meeting cadence as a way to remind folks of the system that they're in.
Yeah, and I'm hearing you say something also additive that trust itself is an organizational competency.
Mm,
The stewardship of it.
hmm
So if it
Yeah.
happens at the level of one-to-one interactions, right? Then of course it's going to happen at the level of team. It's going to happen at the level of enterprise. And
hmm
so I heard in her a powerful sophistication that if we are paying attention, there are practices that steward, building of trust at the beginning, stewarding it, nurturing it, mending it, healing it
hmm
along the way, and celebrating when it actually is part of the fuel of
hmm
of a collective, an organization moving toward
hmm
their agreed sense of impact, their agreed goals. So it's a very sophisticated concept. And
Yep.
with you, yeah, the pieces that others have spoken about, Francis Fry, for example, and Morris in their trust triangle, talk about authenticity, the logic, and the empathy that's required. And I heard in her a yes, thumbs up to that
hmm
frame.
Yep.
And
And
as you're doing that, it's got to seed into the execution levers that you've got. So
yep.
into like detailed feedback processes, right? That's a piece of it, living that triangle in that, and communication, as you point out. So yeah, a really applied and translated sense of how trust is this organizational competency that she is giving visibility to and structure to within her organization.
Yep. Yeah. And I think she did a beautiful job of also saying expect and build competency for bruising situations, if I
Mm,
use your language, right? And she's also got quite a sophisticated way. You can tell, you can even, you can see her take a breath take a breath
Yeah.
and be able to locate where bruising of trust or questions or assumptions have been made, and helping the organization slow down, restitch, reconnect, open up. And I think that that is a wonderful practice for leaders to remember, because it can feel like so much work in creating the infrastructure, the architecture around trust, that, when you get to a point of bruising, it can feel like, oh gosh, we're taking such a step back. But I think in her now, she probably recognizes that that's going to happen, and she also has mechanisms to slow down and address that, so that it doesn't feel like they're going backwards, but it actually allows them to go forward.
Yeah.
Her own sense of efficiency doesn't mean effectiveness. I am amazed if you listen to her story
Yeah.
of her first chapter being around, perhaps just that efficiency. I need to get results. I need to achieve. And somehow as her, chapters evolved and as she has evolved, she now knows deeply that, the pursuit of efficiency does not mean effectiveness for her. And I think that that is just such a powerful mindset for leaders to hold, in all of their practices, personally and as they're, looking at their organization and how they're leading performance.
hmm Yeah. And I also heard in her a lovely, or maybe my aha was like tethering effectiveness with this growth mindset and the sophistication. Again, I'll use that word a lot when it comes to Karen Greve Young.
Mm,
Um, Sophistication again on growth mindset, not being exclusively how might we ahead, but ensuring
mhm,
with that leadership care that we also
mhm,
are able to let go of what may be, what has been, and may want to keep us stuck, right? And like the
mhm.
legacy way of thinking or the legacy way of doing. Um, and yeah, the clarity that she had that both are required for a successful application of moving toward growth, mindset, and effectiveness. Like to make it effective, you've actually got to be able to let go of what hasn't been in many ways
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
Yeah, and so that skill is required as well.
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
Let's move to like this very honest moment, I think, in the conversation near the end where um, Karen was reflecting on what she needs to do to
mhm,
lean into her best self, her most authentic self around leadership, and
mhm.
her own observation that in this C-suite CEO role, a significant part of that role requirement is having time and space to think and room for meaning making, sense making, perspective taking. Megan, we hear that so much. And, listening to Karen again, it was such I hope, a gift to our listeners and a reminder to me, certainly, that not only do we need to take the time, we need to be intentional with what we're doing in it. I just picture her, right? And taking a walk and she's turning on that part of her job, if you will, right?
Yeah,
That part of her CEO identity. This is
yeah,
perspective making time. Like let's go do this.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
what does that look like? What does that look like in your life? Like a curiosity. So just like leaning in. What do you know about creating the time for perspective making and thinking in that way?
Yeah, I think it's what she said. The first step is knowing that it is your job,
hmm
and the
A part of it.
permission, exactly, and the permission to give yourself the time away. I think she also did a great job of her own self-awareness of what are the other practices that she needs to put in place to access her better thinking. And equally, I'm an outside person, I'm a physical person, I'm going to access thinking when I'm moving
Yeah.
my body.
hmm
And when I'm alone, when I'm by myself. So equally, it's walks outside, it's time on a bike, it's usually time outside in nature as a
Mm.
way to help me access perspective making, reframing, being able to see a problem through different lenses. I think it's really important for any executive, for any leader to ensure that they're planning for.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of humans, right? They're on that spectrum again of how much time is myself in my own head and my own heart, and how much do you actually need community to nudge the thinking,
Mm-hmm.
probe the thinking, inspire the
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah.
I love that you and I get to play that for each other, right? In terms of like
Yes.
the conversations that we have. You say a
Yes.
thing and my head's down. I'm really thinking because you're inspiring something else, right? Or something additive, something generative. So it'll be lovely. It'll be lovely for us to explore um, in future conversations too, just like the role of friendships in leadership and performance, and how these executives uh, lean into leverage. I'm not sure what the right verb there is.
Mm-hmm.
The role of friendships that do
Mm-hmm.
just that, receive them as they
Mm-hmm.
are, and allow for aspiration and inspiration
Mm.
um, in the relationships.
Yeah, Michelle Obama in her last book talked about her kitchen table,
Hmm.
hmm
Yeah.
as a mechanism of helping her stay resilient and move through change processes. And yeah, who's at your kitchen table?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
Hmm.
for those that will be listening to this podcast, we'll add that to the question stack. Who's at your kitchen table? Karen also gifted us with one or two books that we might want to look at in the future. So we will drop those into the details of this podcast, so that folks can also have a detailed look at some of those as well.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay. And thus wraps another conversation with a great Canadian leader who is changing our landscape and continuing to help us think about applied executive leadership and how it really can make a difference.
Yeah, thank you, Futurpreneur.
Thank you for joining us on Around the Corner, where purpose, values, and inclusive impact come together to expand what performance can mean. If you found today's conversation meaningful, please follow the podcast and share it with others who are curious about the future of leadership and performance.